Thank you so much, Tim, for joining me today. Really appreciate you spending your time to share your thoughts on your fantastic book, which I got a huge amount from. So, thank you so much, first of all, for being here.
A pleasure.
Thank you. So, but without further ado, I want to just introduce you and say so, Tim Spector is a professor of genetic epidemiology at King's College and also honorary consultant physician at Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital in London. He's a multi award winning expert in personalised medicine and the gut microbiome. He's also the author of 5 books, including the bestsellers Spoon Fed and The Diet Myth. He appears regularly on TV, radio, and podcasts around the world and is one of the 100 most cited scientists in the world. He is the co founder of the personalized nutrition company ZOE and leads the world's biggest citizen science health project, the ZOE Health Study, which I actually use myself. He was awarded an OBE in 2020 for his work fighting COVID-19. And we're talking about his latest book, Food for Life: The New Science of Eating Well. So, of course, I've got to ask the question, which is why is knowing about what we eat so important?
I think the food choices we make are the most important things we can do for our own health. And people have not realized this at all. They've always thought it was other factors. But there's no doubt now that the majority of Western diseases could be prevented by about 80% if we had the optimum diet. And there's no other drug that can do that. So health is the number one reason. And the second reason is if we're interested in reducing climate change, it's also the single most important thing that we as individuals, rather than groups, can do is to alter our diet habits and affect the world that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm like, there's so much sort of packaging around. And why do you think people still calorie count, even though, it's shown not to actually be the best way to lose weight, for example?
Because they've been brainwashed into thinking that it is. And not only food companies, labels, uh, supermarkets, advertising on TV. There's this billion-dollar industry, the weight loss industry, that is predominantly based around the calorie myth. And it seems to, for many people, they think, well, there's no alternative. It's the only way, given the predominance of the sort of calorie agenda that calories in equals calories out, eat less, move more, all these things that we've been taught for the last 30 odd years. And basically, all of them have been shown scientifically to be unworkable for the vast majority of people. But the myth continues because commercially it makes sense.
Yeah, and it's shocking how prevalent it is right across the board. As soon as you go into a supermarket, there's just so much packaging that says otherwise. And I think it confuses people when it comes to eating food generally. And so I was actually wondering, like, which studies do we actually trust, and why is everything we hear about food so complicated?
Well, I think because actually it is complicated. And at some point, we have to stop trying to oversimplify it to ridiculous levels, which is why we got into this calories mess. It's why we got into the all fats are bad mess. It's why the all sugars, and why we're sort of going through this protein craze at the moment. Is this rather facile view that we have to be so reductionist to sell the story to an 8-year-old, and that means that we're using old-fashioned science. We're not using any of the things that we've learned in the last 10 years. And it's also a tool by which manufacturers can hide behind. They hide behind these low calorie, low fat labels and don't have to say anything about the quality of the food that we're eating. And they don't say anything about the dozens of extra chemicals that are in this ultra processed food, which is really behind this whole thing. Nobody really goes on calorie controlled diets who's on a whole veg diet and starts choosing pears above bananas or whatever. It's generally they do this from prepackaged goods, ready meals, um, stuff you buy in takeaways, restaurants, and snacks, and ready-made breakfast cereals. And this is now 57% of what the British public consume in calories, and probably over 70% in children. So that's the main problem. It's uh, the way that ultra processed food, with its low calorie, low fat labels, has infiltrated our lives. And it does this in more so in our country than any other country in Europe. And only the US beats us on a global basis. So it's really a tragedy at a national and growingly global scale that we're not recognizing, because politically it's difficult to say, people don't want to be the one to say we're a nanny state, we can't have this stuff,
Mm.
but we know it's making us sick. And we wouldn't, we have the same things. We're very high on health and safety in some areas. Like if there's some cheap toy imported from China that breaks apart and sticks in a kid's mouth, one kid dies, we ban those toys and immediately, and there's an outcry. But when millions of people die from eating these foods, we continue to sell them as a cheap alternative, and we don't ban them or try and make them more expensive than the healthier versions. So, we have a strange culture that has basically ignored this problem, and we don't really seem to have an infrastructure to sort it out.
Yeah, you're completely correct, because I was so shocked to hear about UPFs, and I was just wondering, why aren't they prohibited if they don't actually serve any purpose? So could you just explain what UPFs are for the listeners, and also just why exactly we still have them?
Ultra processed foods, or UPFs, uh, are basically foods that are the majority of what we eat, and they are foods created in factories by global food companies from extracts of other foods. So they're basically putting things together that were originally like a plant, but they've stripped all the outside bits or the nutritious bits. They take the starch or the other carbohydrates or the protein from it, and they stick them together with high pressure, high pressure, high temperatures, and they glue them together with chemicals called emulsifiers, and they then make them look like real foods again. And this is how your breakfast cereal looks, resembles something that should be edible. Um, Obviously the Rice Krispies aren't actually rice, and the cornflakes don't look like the corn you get off corn on the cob, but they are sold to us as if they are the same, and they have the same nutrients. And then, of course, because they contain nothing, they need nutrients added back in, which is often in a very cheap, unavailable form to us. So not only are they not nutritious, they don't have fiber, but they also are lacking in any goodness for our gut microbes. And studies have now shown in the last couple of years that eating the equivalent homemade or ultra processed meal that looks identical and tastes pretty similar, you are more likely to, on average, overeat by about 10 or 15% every day. So that's why they are making us fat, is because they don't satisfy us enough, and we go back and eat them more, which is why the manufacturers love them, because we buy more of those products. And we've all got our own weaknesses, and we know which ones work for us, because they're made by brilliant chemists in laboratories who are doing a fantastic job picking what combination of stimulants work well in our brain, even if they don't occur in nature. But they now know what lights up our reward centers in our brain.
Yeah, I was absolutely shocked by it, because as I was reading the book, there it was on the counter, a very well known crisps that people eat and cannot stop eating. And I was just like, this is just completely reconstituted. And I was so shocked, because I was like, okay, immediately not eating this. And so that's why I found real value in reading the book, because I was just like, okay, I need to be way more careful with what I'm eating. And I think, you'd mentioned about sort of simplified messages, but there is this sort of whole kind of idea behind, eating the rainbow. So why should we eat the rainbow?
Well, we should certainly eat the rainbow rather than just eating the rainbow of packet colours. So, which is very easy to
Yeah.
do. Um, so, eating the rainbow of natural foods means that we didn't. We've had this saying for a while, and yes, most people know eat more fruit and veg. We haven't really known why until recently, and it's because the more brightly coloured plants are, generally they have more of these defense chemicals in them that are come under the general name of polyphenols. And people will hear more and more about this word. They used to be called antioxidants, but there are thousands of these different chemicals, and they're essentially rocket fuel for our gut
Mm.
microbes. So they are a source of energy and nutrition for our gut microbes, and our body themselves can't use it, but our microbes convert them into really healthy chemicals for the rest of our body. And they're often associated with bitter tastes as well as these very bright reds and blues and purple colors. And it turns out that each time you have a slightly different rainbow or a different color, you've got a different set of chemicals in there. And that diversity of chemicals is another reason that, you know, I tell people to eat a diversity of plants, because that means that you're giving different chemical fertilizers to help produce lots of different gut microbes. And I think this is this new concept of how we need to look at food, not from calories and fats, but from realizing they're made of thousands of chemicals, that you want to be the right chemicals to feed your gut microbes, who in turn produce the chemicals that help your body, help your immune system, reduce your appetite cravings, all these kind of um, intricate signaling that in evolution we've evolved to have, and evolution didn't allow us to suddenly have these artificial foods that change all those uh, pathways that have taken millions of years to evolve, and bypassing many of these other factors, which is why we overeat.
Mm.
So eating the rainbow, really important. And other, but also realizing that other plants have polyphenols as well. And olive oil is a great example. In the past, people said it was bad because it had lots of fat in it, and it has even lots of saturated fat in it. But every nutrition expert will tell you that is a very healthy food, and it's healthy because it has lots of polyphenols in it. So
Mm.
it's it's the book is all about trying to dig into food so people understand themselves what are the good and the bad bits in it, and they don't just take the top line uh, idea. They understand what it is they're eating and why. And if people understand some of these messages, they're much more likely, I think, to follow them sustainably, rather than just being told there's a rule out there that says you've got to have your 5 a day, and that you know that lumps in orange
Mm.
juice, with it, which is, in my opinion, probably worse than
Yeah.
Coca-Cola for your body, with something that is really healthy. Doesn't make any distinction. So I think it's understanding that.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because I think it was a bit of an eye opener for me. I've had a really troubled relationship with food generally. I've got irritable bowel syndrome, so it's such a pain trying to find something that works, because I've been on those FODMAP diets and things like that, trying to figure out what is actually affecting me, and I have no concept. It could be anything. So, how do we find the best personalized diet for ourselves, especially since I've tried like nutritionists, and it's just not getting better. So I've started taking your advice and just cooking my own food and just eating what I like, but in a slightly different, healthier sort of cooked way, if you could say.
Yeah, well, I think that's good. A good advice is to stop eating for a while ultra processed foods, and so you're in control of what you're eating. You know what you're eating, because obviously at home you don't add emulsifiers and artificial sweeteners and food dyes and preservatives and things to it. You just have the actual food, and you try and get a small amounts of lots of different things. And I think that's the key to it. And what I believe, and what the personalized nutrition company ZOE that I co-founded also believe, is that it's about adding foods to your diet, not eliminating them. It's that the idea that your plate isn't dominated by one thing. It's just, it's building up a tolerance to lots of small different things. That is what our ancestors probably ate. So the for someone with who wants to know how they respond to foods, yes, you can either get one of these personalized nutrition kits like ZOE, if you have the money, and that they do cost several £100, which is the new scientific way to do this, to see if you can cope well with carbs or fats, and what your gut microbiome is like. But many people might not want to do that, or don't have the money at the moment. And so what I would advise those people to do is to first cut out ultra processed foods for a while, cook yourself, start having a greater fasting interval overnight, so that you're trying to eat within a smaller time window. And we've done this big study with the ZOE Health study app that is free, that we had about 100,000 people who'd never done it before try to eat within a 10-hour window, and most succeeded, which was very exciting. And they, for at least 3 weeks, and reported, those with IBS reported less bloating and symptoms, for example. So just giving the gut a rest, not having late night snacks, not having early breakfasts, does allow your gut to repair itself overnight. And I think this is a whole other concept of not just changing what you eat, but how you eat. Don't just because our culture and advertising tells us we all have to have breakfast doesn't mean that suits everybody. And there are other people who like to snack regularly, but you need to find out what suits you, whether you can get by on two big meals a day, or you need to add extra stuff. So it's about experimenting with not only the foods, but how you eat as well. And I think and realizing that most people aren't going to get a quick fix. They all the diet industry is all about getting your bikini in within 4 weeks, and sorting all your problems out. I think people should instantly forget anything that claims that, because that will only rebound and cause misery and depression. Even if you do lose weight, it'll come straight back. But the idea is that all these changes need to be sustainable for years. So that's what you're aiming for, is a small gradual change. As you slowly improve your gut microbes, you improve your inner health, and you sort of, and then if you get that right, then things like weight will eventually improve. But it's all about small gradual choices, gradual swaps, and understanding what healthy food looks like.
Yeah, no, definitely. I might actually take you up on the Zoe study, honestly, just because I think it might be really useful for me. And, and you talked about the culture and the environment that we have. And obviously, we're going through something massive. We have been going through something massive for a while, and it's going to only get worse, which is obviously our environment and climate. And so, how do we manage and deal with the food insecurity and poverty that clearly is, we are seeing quite a lot of right now?
Well, I think primarily it's a political and financial solution rather than a nutritional one. Countries that have less um, discrepancy between the poorest and the richest, don't have the amount of problems with food that the UK and the US have. So, first of all, it's having a more egalitarian society, which necessarily means higher taxes, etc., etc. Obviously, you can do some things within our existing society, and that is making school meals free for everybody and improving the quality of those school meals. You can improve all the food at institutions. I mean, not only schools, but then you've got hospitals and prisons, and many council-run places which are really neglected in terms of the quality of the food, and that's easily controllable by the state if we wanted to improve the health of the nation. And then, of course, it's changing uh, the difference between healthy food costing more than ultra processed food and things like advertising. But again, that comes down to political will, and the government were given a very good pointer in that direction from the National Food Strategy, and they've ignored it. So they say that is they don't want to be accused of being the nanny state, and if someone on the checkout wants to buy a mega bag of Doritos and a 2-for-1 offer, they should be absolutely free to do so. But interestingly, they don't no longer said they should they should do that for a liter of vodka. So it's or you would give vodka to children. So I think that there is hypocrisy there, um, but a lot of it is due to lobbying of the food companies, who have enormous power over our people who make decisions in health. Sadly,
Yes, I completely agree, and it's so terrifying what's happening, honestly. And thank you so much, Tim, for speaking to me about this very, very important subject that we still really have just scratched the surface for the wider public, I would say. So, a really important chat. So, thank you so much.
it's been a pleasure.